Fan-made songs are a staple to any major fandom on the internet. Everybody loves music, and everybody finds themselves connecting with music on a personal level, so songs that are about an already existing interest are bound to attract a lot of fans. This is very true in the case of Five Nights at Freddy's, which has had a thriving community of musicians making music about the murderous animatronic bear since The Living Tombstone kicked off the trend nearly a decade ago. To celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, I'm here to talk about some of the FNAF songs that really stand out to me. These are songs that I don't just think are bangers, but songs that I think do such an amazing job at diving into the FNAF franchise and exploring the intricacies of the characters and the story. Because although it's great that there are talented musicians making music that's fun to listen to, there are also musicians that have managed to flesh out the series to such a significant degree, which is so unbelievably cool and interesting. Firstly, I'd like to discuss a personal favorite of mine that does an excellent job at dissecting and exploring the deeply disturbing experience of the Five Nights at Freddy's characters. Dance to Forget is a song written and released by Tryhard Ninja featuring vocals from Nina Zeitlin. This song is inspired by Ballora from Sister Location, and the interpretation of Ballora as a character is really fascinating, and the approach to the writing on this track is honestly chilling. Although a lot of FNAF songs are focused on the pain of the victims, they're usually about the emotional impact of the tragedy. A lot of them are very emotionally charged retellings of the missing children's incident, or a focused discussion on what the children that were killed had lost, or what their loved ones had lost. Which makes sense, it's easily and obviously the most significant part of their experience. But what I find so interesting and eerie about this song is that it's from the perspective of a haunted animatronic, but it remains in character with the animatronic, as opposed to the spirit that possesses it, and provides an entirely different perspective on the horrors of these creations. The lyrics of this song are centered around the anguish and torment that Ballora has experienced and continues to experience being an animatronic trapped underground with no sign of life. It's an entirely different take on the experience of being an animatronic, focusing on the disturbing reality of being a robotic being. I hate my metal bones and gears creak in my chest forever cold, a cold and maddening descent. The particular and blunt word choice complemented by the performance and the robust production enhances and highlights the discomforting and complicated pain that the character is experiencing. The visual that's painted through the lyrics of gears and mechanical parts creaking in your chest is so disturbing, and Ballora's sincere and outward hatred and distaste for her cold and metal body parts is legitimately chilling. I also love the idea of Ballora continuing to dance in the dark, abandoned Afton robotics bunker as a method of distraction and coping. As the title and chorus suggests, the time spent in this abandoned location with this abnormal, uncomfortable body is more than enough to drive the character mad, and despite the lack of anyone to perform for, she continues to dance to forget about it all. This idea and explanation is so interesting, and it's surprisingly sad. Ballora is a character that hasn't been given much to work with in the actual franchise. She's a pretty bizarre and standout character in the ever-growing FNAF cast, but she's never really been explored as a character beyond ideas and theories from fans. This song doesn't change that because, well, it's also made by fans, but it is handedly my favorite portrayal and interpretation of the character in any media fan-made or official. This song alone made me like the character more, because when I think of her, I think of this dark and haunting track that portrays a feeling of dread and suffering that is so unique to this franchise. Staying on the topic of how some songs make their best effort to flesh out a particular character, there probably isn't a character that has gotten that treatment more than the titular child murderer William Afton. William Afton / Springtrap is such a popular focus for FNAF songs, and it makes sense why. For one, he is the most integral character to the story, so if you're going to write anything about the tale of FNAF, he basically has to be there in some way. But secondly, there are a lot of musicians in this community that have mastered the villain song, whether it be the perfection of the evil murderous voice or the dark and gritty production. There are just so many artists that are capable of making a villain anthem for the Bunny Man.
I've done some terrible things in my life. I have done unbearable things.
The main one I want to focus on is Terrible Things by Axie. Axie has, in fact, mastered both of what I mentioned, and has done an incredible job at taking advantage of that. He has a deep, booming voice that overpowers the listener in every performance, and the instrumentals and production choices he's made in his music add so much to his artistry. Axie's Terrible Things is a Charlie's Inferno-inspired FNAF song from the perspective of Springtrap, and what makes it so engaging is how thorough it is in exploring the character of William Afton, and how the song itself progresses alongside the portrayal of Afton. The song starts off from the perspective of Springtrap in the FNAF 3 setting. This verse is a dark reflection on Afton's actions, where he acknowledges the atrocities he's committed, but does so in an expected, unapologetic manner. But after this first verse where he does so, the style then completely switches up to be more upbeat and cheery, showcasing Afton via his Purple Guide depiction as opposed to Springtrap. After what is essentially a recap of how many terrible things he has done, William Afton basically just says that despite how unbearable everything he has done is, and even subtly mentioning that the spirits of his victims want revenge, he says he does not want to die. It's as if he's saying that death would be a form of defeat to him, and the energetic style of this part of the song almost comes off as taunting, both of which are very in character for this villain. But then we switch back to the darker style in the perspective of Springtrap's current situation, and this sequence musically, visually, and writing-wise perfectly encapsulates the suffering that Afton is going through to hold on to his life. The constant battling of his inner and outer demons is exhausting, and the ending of this verse bluntly expresses the excruciating longevity of this suffering, referencing a lot of the games in the series up until he's attached onto puppeteer strings. But the song then switches back to the upbeat style from before, but with a very key change. As opposed to saying, "I don't want to die," Afton says, "I just want to die." We started off at the point of FNAF 3, where Afton has already been put through hell via the Springlock failure, but his relentless desire wouldn't allow him to give up. He didn't want to die. But after going through the events of the following games in the timeline, eventually reaching Ultimate Custom Night where he is attached to puppeteer strings, constantly being tortured with no escape, he just wants to die. I guess technically he would already be dead, but his soul has not been put to rest, so it still makes sense. That's why this part of the song is him utterly begging to die. He still showcases his ego a little bit, but he also has to admit the sheer amount of pain he is in. After this point of the song, there's a bridge that basically tells Afton's origin story. In a much more mellow tone, the lyrics describe how he started off as a normal man, and definitely did not attempt to work with anything in the lines of killing kids or trapping ghosts. Why would you think that? The music and vocal performance then picks up the energy when it retells the event of Elizabeth's death, and how that snapped something inside William after he made a promise that he would bring his loved ones back. This part, and others, are obviously not fully accurate to the lore of the series, but it's still a great rewriting and interpretation. The end of the song then comes into play here, and it is an amazing combination of the styles this song has been made up of. Afton really has no choice at this point but to surrender. He's trapped in this eternal hell, paying the consequences for his actions with his new friend, presumably this song's iteration of UCN's vengeful spirit, and that's how it ends. I think this song takes the cake for the best William Afton song. The portrayal of his villainy, his ego, and his relentlessness is so excellently done. Because here's the thing about Afton in the games: post-Springlock failure, he has no motive. Technically his motive to kill was to achieve eternal life, I guess, but by the time of FNAF 3, Springtrap's only motive is the desire to not give up. The desire to never be defeated by another, no matter what. It is nothing but ego. And it's very clear that Axie understood that and knew exactly how to work with it. But the song also provides a really interesting interpretation of the story from the perspective of the character by having his views and feelings change over time as his ego wears thin after each and every trial and tribulation. It's a fantastic idea that was executed with so much creativity. The quality of this song is beyond insane. Now that we have the story and character development covered, it cannot be understated how well put together this track is. Axie's vocal performance is so outstanding and his embodiment of the character is incredible. And there are so many pieces of the production that contribute so much to the song musically and story-wise, but easily my favorite, and the part I could gush about forever, is the sampling of in-game sound effects from Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm going to play a clip of the track where this is very noticeable.
Think that I get used to this, let my insides effervesce. Humankind.
The sound that plays during the start of a night in FNAF 3 is worked into the instrumental, and it's so natural and actually adds so much to the dramatic tone. Then the song samples the Save Them minigame from FNAF 2, and it's absolutely a highlight.
Children will channel all their powers to
The layering of the vocals makes it sound natural, the tempo induces a feeling of panic from the perspective of Afton, and the artwork of various minigames from the series alongside the music is so cool. Terrible Things is a great song, a brilliant story, and an engaging piece of art. It also does an amazing job at portraying one of the most integral characters, if not the most, in all of Five Nights at Freddy's. But before we're done talking about Springtrap, I will mention some other songs from other artists that also explore the character that are more than worthy of acknowledging. Our Little Horror Story by Aviators does a great job of encapsulating the villainy of the character. Aviators themselves said this song is from Purple Guy's perspective as he hunts down the player in FNAF 3. This was also back when people thought FNAF 3 was going to be the last game in the series, which is hella funny now, but it's also cool because this does feel like a theme song to a Springtrap final boss. It's very grandiose and epic. Unbroken by Man on the Internet is also a prime example of a strong performance helping portray Afton as a villain. Whereas Our Little Horror Story feels like a theme song for a final boss, Unbroken is more like if Afton had a villain song in a musical. The performance and writing style is very unique for a FNAF song. Stepping away from William Afton specifically, but sticking with the villains of FNAF, I also want to mention Already Dead by Kitten Sneeze, featuring Danger James music. This track is from the perspective of both Glitchtrap and Vanny, as she's overtaken by the control of Glitchtrap. The duet between the two is great at showcasing that conflict and the horrific dynamic, and the performance portraying Vanny is pretty fantastic at expressing the terrifying situation that she's in, and it's an actual fucking banger as well. So those are a couple examples of songs that explore characters in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, whether it be the pain and suffering of a victim, or madness of a villain. Obviously, for the sake of storytelling or executing a concept, not everything that's said or portrayed in these songs are 100% accurate to the canon of the timeline. But generally, they simply tweak the lore a little to flesh out different interpretations of different characters. But now, I'm going to take you through a trip down memory lane and revisit a song that's 0% accurate to the canon, but thrives off of that fact. It's Been So Long by The Living Tombstone is a classic piece of fan-made FNAF media that has honestly transcended the FNAF series. I don't really need to get into the background of this one or explain the structure of it to you. It's a banger to this day, it's ridiculously iconic, and it's just an all-around well-made song. It has very much not been forgotten, but it's been nearly a decade since anyone took a second to talk about just how little sense this song makes. It's Been So Long is from the perspective of the mother of one of the victims of the missing children's incident, and the song paired with the video basically says that this mother went on to possess the puppet and her child possessed Golden Freddy. I think, I'm honestly not even sure. Most people would tell you that's what the song is about, that the mother becomes the puppet, and the line, "It won't be long before I become a puppet," feels way too specific and purposeful for that to not be the implication. But the video depicts the puppet helping every victim except for the mother's child, which would be quite stupid if the puppet was meant to be the mother. The killer is also depicted using a regular Freddy costume, even though FNAF 2 does mention the suit being yellow. If it was Golden Freddy, that would make sense, because we didn't know at the time that it was a spring Bonnie suit, but we at least knew it was fucking yellow. I find it really funny that one of, or arguably the biggest FNAF fan song, is essentially just a fanfic, but that's honestly also why I love it. Songs like Dance to Forget or Terrible Things do an excellent job at exploring the characters in official FNAF media, and barely stretching the canon of the characters. But It's Been So Long completely makes up a character, and completely alters the canon of other characters. Again, it is essentially a fanfic as a song, and I think that's really neat. It does also therefore provide a perspective that we don't get in many other songs, or in officially licensed media. That is, the way the events of FNAF affect the families of the many victims. We see that in written FNAF media from time to time, and I can think of some FNAF fan games that try to do it as well, but it's definitely something not accounted for or focused on very often. It's interesting and saddening to hear the mother of one of the victims express her regrets and grief and anger. It's Been So Long is obviously very popular for being a good song as well as its incredible memeage, but it's genuinely great to this day as both a song but also a unique take on a FNAF fan song. Despite it being one of the first and being so much older than most, it is still a distinct approach. Speaking of FNAF fan songs that are pretty old at this point and are great songs but also distinct, unique, and fun ideas that's totally not a specific category, I think we need to mention the greatest piece of FNAF-related media of all time, FNAF the Musical. I fucking love FNAF the Musical more than anything. I can't do a thorough analysis of this 30-minute piece in the midst of a series of other songs, but I love this project so much that I needed to at least bring it up. The way FNAF the Musical incorporates so much from the first 3 games in a coherent and creative way is so goddamn cool. You get to see so much of the cast of the first 2 games, and none of the overlapping interferes with its unique story. You get the most significant characters from the time, all with fun twists and fun personalities. I love that Purple Guy isn't the killer, but rather just a desperate idiot that did something incredibly stupid. I love that Springtrap is barely a character and acts more as a weapon that is being used by Purple Guy. It makes it so they can exist separately, they can both exist at this point in time, and it's also pretty funny. I also like that Balloon Boy is a little robot that Nate can remotely control, also making it so that the character can exist at this point in time and not be weird. And this iteration of Phone Guy, starring the one and only MatPat, is fucking baller. The humor of the musical is amazing, even if it's juvenile at points or a little cringy. That's a part of the charm. This project was so overly ambitious that it was bound to be rough around the edges, but that's something the team obviously knew, and it makes it better. And of course, the cast featuring major YouTubers was a big part of the appeal when the individual nights were being released, and it does contribute a lot to the humor and charm as well. But most importantly, of course, FNAF the Musical is not just entertaining and cute and charming, the music does fucking slap. I wish we could hear Markiplier sing more, because he has such an amazing voice and his performances throughout the musical are gorgeous. And of course, Nate Wants to Battle is an incredible vocalist in his own right, and brought a lot to this project. Everyone that voiced the puppets also did a great job at playing the goofy characters, and they've honestly changed my perception of the main FNAF characters for the rest of time. Again, I don't have the time to go through FNAF the Musical in its entirety with how big it is and how many other songs I've talked about, but FNAF the Musical is just so creative as a piece of fan-made work. I love this version of all the characters, I love the dynamic between them, and it's a beautiful package of fun songs and entertainment. It completely goes against so many of the core fundamentals of the premise and story of FNAF, but everything makes sense in this original story, and every element is still taken from the games. It's so charming, it's so fun, and it's better than every piece of existing FNAF media. That is my take of the day, I will say that on the record. So that does it for songs that explore characters, a song that borderline makes up a character, and the musical, which is a complete reworking of the FNAF story as we know it. But what about songs that predict the fucking future?
Left behind all this will unwind. I was never all that kind. If you were to rewind, then you would.
DAGames is one of the biggest nerdcore musicians this community has ever seen, and has been for many years. He's made plenty of songs about numerous popular games and has become insanely popular himself from doing so. And of course, a part of that popularity comes from his catalog of FNAF songs. DAGames has made quite a few fantastic and iconic FNAF songs that would be worthy of talking about at some point, such as Game Over, Break My Mind, or Not Here All Night. But right now, I'm going to talk about his first sister location song, Left Behind. DAGames and plenty of other musicians like to be ahead of the curve on releasing their songs. What I mean is, a lot of nerdcore artists will make songs about a game that is on the way but not released. In this instance, FNAF Sister Location wasn't released until October 2016, but it was announced in May, and DAGames had a Sister Location song out by the end of June. Again, that isn't that weird, but usually when artists do this, the songs either end up being immediately dated as soon as the game comes out, or they are so vague and unfocused that they don't even feel like they're about the game that they're claiming to be about. But what makes DAGames Left Behind such a freakish part of FNAF history is how close it was to getting the biggest twists and reveals of Sister Location correct. In the very first verse of this song, DAGames says, "So have a seat and be afraid. Fears are about to commence the final ritual. One body's all we need for this to be complete. And when the day begins to take form, you won't be leaving those doors. You'll only live with us inside the darkness as we tear you up inside." This literally sounds like it's a narration of the ending of Sister Location. You could make the argument that it has a certain level of vagueness or that it isn't that crazy of a thing to say based on the existing FNAF games at the time, but the specific word choice here is pretty shocking. This part of the song is also incredible and builds up to the chorus perfectly. He does also say in the second verse, "You won't believe what I have done to you, I've made you look brand new, oh how cute," and in the third verse he says, "Reborn again, our suits are now refined, breathing new life inside our tombs tonight." It's crazy how perfectly this describes the possession of Mike at the end of Sister Location, without even having the context of the game to describe such events. Because although there have been instances of people possessing animatronics in FNAF since day one, there has never been an instance of an animatronic or even a spirit expressing a desire to use a living person to break free, let alone this actually happening canonically. So for Will Ryan of DAGames fame to be so accurate in implying that is honestly baffling. Because the lyrics don't just say, "I'm spooky and evil and I'm gonna kill you." Some lyrics do say that, but a line like, "One body's all we need to be complete," straight up doesn't make sense with the context of pre-Sister Location FNAF media being our only source. What the hell do you mean one body is all you need? What do you need it for? Getting a body actually benefiting your situation has never been explored or established in the franchise. How the fuck did you arrive at this destination, Will? Fun fact before we pivot, if you go to the Genius page for Left Behind, all the annotations just state that the lyrics are referencing events of the game as if it's a matter of fact. If you click on the "one body's all we need" line, it just says that's in reference to the ending of Sister Location with the scooping room scene. Because yeah, that's what it reads like, but Will couldn't have known that scene would exist when it was written. The fact that this DAGames song predicted arguably the biggest twist there is to see in the first 5 FNAF games is really weird and a really cool piece of FNAF history. This track is also a banger to this day. Parts of it have aged awkwardly, but it's a great song. But the thing with DAGames specifically is he's actually just good at doing this in general. There's another example of this that isn't quite as shocking, but worthy of mentioning as I don't see anyone else pointing it out. DAGames' Help Wanted song Parasite was released a month before the game came out. He actually commented on the early release of this one, basically saying he didn't care if it came out before the game because it hasn't made a difference thus far, and he safely assumed there wasn't going to be anything significant or major to the story. Which was a fair thing to think before the game's launch. I and plenty of other people also assumed it was merely a VR recreation of other FNAF games that was going to be mostly disconnected from the story, after Pizza Sim and UCN felt pretty conclusive. But obviously the game did work into the story and timeline of the series, and introduced Glitch Trap. And Parasite, which came out before the game, works pretty goddamn well as a Glitch Trap song. There's nothing as crazy as Left Behind, like I said, but the pre-chorus of this track is all about an expression of wanting to be let out, and both the first and second verse reference you bringing him to life. Again, this is a pretty surprising thing to execute so well without the material of the game. Despite not having the existence of Glitch Trap to even think about, this just so happened to work almost perfectly. Like I said, plenty of nerdcore artists have released songs about games before the launch of the game, and even when songs come out on the day of, that still means it was written beforehand. So there are definitely many examples of this, and honestly that'd be an interesting video in its own right in the future, but DAGames easily has the most iconic instance of this happening with Left Behind, and it was also the most shockingly accurate that I can remember. And he's managed to pull it off again, like with Parasite. For the record, this can go wrong. DAGames' song For Ruin has fuck all to do with the game, doesn't make any sense, and is pretty mid. But the moment of Left Behind being proven right, months after its release, is such a cool memory. Before we wrap up, let's just talk about FNAF for a little bit, just because it's the 10th anniversary. I've had a tumultuous relationship with this franchise, especially publicly, as I've historically been very critical of the series. But ultimately, there's a reason I keep coming back despite reaping basically no financial gain in the last year or so, and it's because I can't stop loving this series. I found FNAF 1 as soon as it came out, before it was even approved by Steam Greenlight. Aside from a handful of creepypastas, it was really my first exposure to horror, and I got so invested immediately. And with every single release after the first, even the more mid ones, I just got more and more attached to the series. I played every game to death, I watched so many videos, I made content on it as early as 2015, my favorite character from the series was my first ever tattoo that I got for my 16th birthday, and of course, it completely jump-started my career on YouTube. I had made at least 1,000 videos before I fully committed to making FNAF videos in 2021, and it has given me the opportunity to communicate with an audience, make somewhat of a living doing so, and even meeting my closest friends in the world. I owe my everything to this goofy series with the robot bear. I'm not as interested in FNAF as I used to be because I do straight up dislike the direction it's been headed in. Security Breach is borderline my least favorite game ever made. I do think Help Wanted is overrated, hideous junk, and it is still hard to be excited about newer stuff. But that doesn't change that I love so much within this series, and I actually have been really happy with recent releases. Help Wanted 2 is so much better than the original, and I had so much fun playing it. And the FNAF movie reminded me so much of the earlier games that I fell in love with, and it gave me the perfect amount of fan service to gush over. And Into the Pit, the game, that's coming out probably the day this video does, looks really cool. I'm really excited to play it. I do still want to distance myself professionally from the series going forward, because that does make it a little more complicated, and I'd like this channel's identity to be about more than just FNAF, because obviously all of my most viewed videos are about FNAF. But chances are, I will still be engaging with this series for the rest of time, because I love it. So, happy birthday to Frederick Fazbear. Shout out and thank you to everyone that has worked on the series and provided so much to millions of people. And here's to another 10 years.